Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and today we are going to do February's Block of the Month from Quilting Confections, and the Block of the Month program is called Shades of Gray, and we are going to be using the Eleanor Burns 6.5-inch square up ruler to square up some of the half square triangles that we're going to need. And I'm going to do it in a different way than just making those little triangles, and it's going to go very quick and it's going to be very accurate. Let's start with the fabrics that we are going to need. We are going to need 2 large squares, and I would recommend anywhere between 8 to 8.5 inches. You're going to square this up, so anything along that line is going to be good. And you're going to need 4 2.5-inch squares. And on those 2.5-inch squares, you will need to draw a line right down the center of them all on the back. And you're going to need 4 rectangles, and these rectangles measure at 3 by 5.5 inches, and you're going to need 4. Now this measurement is going to give you 1 block. Now with this large piece of fabric, we are going to make 8 3-inch square half square triangles, and we are going to cut them out of this after it has been sewn. So what you need to do is take a line and draw right from one corner to the other and from this corner over, so you have a big X. And with that X, you are going to use that mark as a guide, and you need to sew a 1/4 inch on each side of those 2 lines. Now the dotted lines here are going to be cutting lines, so let's get the 1/4 inch sewn first, and then I'll show you how to cut this up. So you have the 2 seams on each side of the lines that are going in the X of the big square. Now you need to cut this apart, and you will cut down the center as one cut, down the center in this way as another cut. Then you are going to cut on the original X that you did. And once they are cut, they are going to make 8 half square triangles. So now you need to take these, and we are going to trim them down to the size that we need. The nice way of doing it this way is your grain lines are still in the right area. To square them up, you're going to need 1 piece at a time. And with the ruler, you will notice some measurements along here. This side has 1/2 inch measurements, and this side has full measurements. And you will see here that you have a 3-inch mark. Now that 3-inch mark is going to give you a 3-inch half square triangle. Now a 3-inch half square triangle means that this is going to be 3 inches by 3 inches. Now in order to use the ruler, it's very simple. Now I've darkened up the seam line so that you would see where the stitching would go. If you need a 3-inch half square, you're going to use that 3 mark. And that 3 mark does not go on the edge. That 3-inch mark goes right on the seam, and you can see here we have lots, but this is what needs to be trimmed off, because when this is opened up, it will equal a 3-inch. If you needed 4-inch, then you would slide it up to the 4-inch mark. Again, do not use the line that you cut. You need to use the line that you stitched on. Then discard this. Trim off the corners. And when you trim off the corners, it's going to just prevent those little dog ears from hanging out on each side of these triangles. And when you open it up, you have a perfect 3-inch square. So let's do all 8 of these. Now normally I would recommend press all of the seams going in the same direction, but in this case I would recommend doing 4 to the dark side and 4 to the light side, and doing that will help the construction come along a lot easier. So taking your 2 stacks you are going to sew them together, making this little arrow or triangle. And because you did one seam in this direction and one seam in this direction, when you put them together, the seams are opposite. So they are going to nestle together quite nice, and you're going to be able to sew all the way down there at 1/4 of an inch, and do that for all 4. Now when you've had those seams going in opposite direction, they will nestle together and you will get a perfect point. Now take these to the iron and press the seams open and flat, and that way you don't have more bulk on one side than the other. Now you're going to take these 3" by 5½ inches and you're going to sew them onto this arrow. So you'll bring it to the machine and you're going to sew along this edge for all 4 blocks. So the bottom pieces have been put on, and press the seams going towards this light one. Now we have 4 of these 2½ inch squares with the line drawn down the center. With each block, you're going to place it right in the corner, and the drawn line is going to be your stitching line, and you're going to stitch right down that line and then trim off 1/4 of an inch and discard this triangle. And now you need to press these down, but very similar to the seams here, press 2 in one direction and 2 in the other direction. So the block will consist of 4 of these, and you will take this and it is going to go around. And when you place the 4 blocks together, you will see that you have a solid square in the center, and then these arrows are going to point all the way around. Let me flip this over and I'll show you how the seam allowances will go for these 4 corners. Now by pressing the seam in one direction and pressing the seam in the other, again you're going to be able to match up these points a lot better, here and here. So sew along this seam and then sew along this seam, and you'll have all 4 blocks together. Now when you sew these blocks together, the seam should go to the lighter piece, and that way that will stay nice and flat. Then when you sew the top one, well, if you press this in this direction and this in this direction, do you see how that seam there, now that the seam is going in opposite directions, will open up? And there is your block done. Now I've done this block in another variation, but I did make one change. I took this half square triangle and I've turned it in this direction. Now the block looks like this. Let me show you what it looks like when this is put together, and look at the difference the block will make. So our Shades of Gray block of the month is done for February, and it's a very easy and quick block to make. But it never does cease to amaze me when you change one little component, the difference that the block can make. 2 things made it really easy to do. Number 1, the 6½ inch square up ruler, and the other one was pressing those seams opposing each other before the construction. I will put a link in the description to the free pattern for the block of the month from Quilting Confections. Thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe, and as always, come on back. Let's see what we're sewing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.